Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who just realized that no one has shown up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi.
Hello and welcome to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past and their real impact and relevance today.
Okay, you've
Jim
lost
Longo.
it.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. I just thought of it.
I don't blame you. I mean, you could have taken the door on the right, but you took the door on the left. So here we are. We are wrapping up our little mini series within a series of walking simulators to discuss, which is inside the larger indie games umbrella, to talk about the Stanley Parable, which is a game I played back when it came out, thereabouts on the PC. Is a Source Engine game, so it made me ill to begin with, but you can actually, even if a game doesn't have FOV supported, you can still use the console. So I was able to continue the next day by setting the FOV directly. Yeah.
Okay.
And the later version, I actually played the Ultra Deluxe version on the PlayStation 4 this time because I actually have gotten more sensitive. So I didn't want to be in front of the PC. In general, I will try to be on a TV as much as possible in the future. To avoid nausea for first-person experiences. But anyway, I played the Ultra Deluxe version this time. But you played the original, which is super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they sell them separately. Sometimes what was it? I guess it was Dear Esther, right?
It was Dear Esther, yeah.
Both of them
Yeah.
together package, which but good for them for keeping both, I guess, even from a game preservation perspective. I still would have liked to have had both versions if I bought the Super Deluxe, but anyway, yeah. So I played the original just because I did not play it back in the day, so I wanted to see it in its first, well, technically second form, but in its pre-deluxe form.
Yeah. To be fair, the original game is entirely contained in the Ultra Deluxe edition, though it is in a different engine and all of that. But we'll get into that, I guess, as we talk. So this game was based on a mod from 2011 that was entirely made by Davey Wreden, who was one of the co-creators of the commercial release in 2013. With William Pugh. They did have a team, and they had a company called Galactic Cafe, I believe, is what I saw. Although it's a little unclear. It's like what of these things is the original, and what things are the Super Deluxe or Ultra Deluxe rather. Both the mod and subsequent versions of the game had the narration by Kevin Brightly, which is a huge part of the game, obviously, and we'll talk about how that works. We are not going to review 2013 for anyone. We literally just did it 2 weeks ago with Gone Home, so we're just moving right on past that. Go if you need to have us set it in its time, go listen to the first few minutes of the Gone Home episode from 2 weeks ago. So as not to repeat like we did last week for Fez, which we had done the first episode of like 6 weeks prior. So we're kind of all in the same, few years right here. So we're not gonna repeat ourselves. Anyway, this is your first time playing this one. It is the third of our walking simulators. I'm not going to ask you to pick a favorite, but I'd at least like to hear what you were expecting coming into this game and what happened as a result.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that's a good opener. I think I didn't even completely remember that this was technically a walking simulator, or in that category. It is funny that all of these games I've been playing are roughly around the same time zone or time area. So that's I wonder if there was something. Maybe it was Dear Esther, or maybe it was. I can't think of any other examples that may have kicked this off, but maybe just the modding community itself. But the only thing coming into this game that I had kind of in the back of my head was that it was humorous. I actually didn't really have any I mean, I'd seen the cover art, which was a computer, so I was like, okay, it's going to be some commentary on office work, probably. My own assumption. As soon as I started the game, I immediately thought of Severance, the show.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely did, especially with the pressing keys and all of that. I was like, "Oh, this is
yeah,
very much like the staring at the thing until you see the pattern, and but you press keys." It was
yeah.
such a weird thing. Yeah,
I mean, there's always been so many good examples of office commentary and office worker commentary over the years, but it was nice to have a game hit it so hard, and that's obviously not the only thing it's doing here. But yeah, so I came in as knowing that there was humor, but that was it, and I think I knew there was a narrator, but I didn't understand how important the narrator was. So and it was weird coming off of, well, including Firewatch, three others, right, that I had just played. So each of those were so focused on, a specific thing that they were trying to do largely around, story, I guess I'll say, being the key focus. And so it was nice and refreshing and unexpected to start this one and to have the subversion be so much the point for me, at least, and
mm,
that I guess there's a story, but I guess the point of it is that in fact there's this one of the endings or one of the sequences talks about, I guess it would have been the apartment one.
yeah,
I think it's the apartment one that basically is talking about, what what is story in an interactive medium, and is the story really just whatever the player ends up doing, kind of thing. So it was like multiple layers of meta commentary on playing a sequence of walking simulators, So
yeah,
this was a
yeah.
perfect one to end on because of that commentary on, I don't know how much they intended for it to be the case for the subgenre, but obviously for video games in general.
Oh,
So I
I mean,
was,
it's an intended commentary. Davey Reedon is one of those most uh, meta and commenting on the medium or his career people ever, because of the beginner's guide, which I also played, although not I think when it released, but maybe a few years later, um, is all about this fictional game developers games that you're playing as a series of games with Davey Reedon commenting on them. um, and of course he's made all of these things which are like little snippets of things. I don't think the thing is, you don't know, did he make this as a thing he was investigating himself and then like put into this thing, the beginner's guide, or did he make it for the beginner's guide? Like,
yeah.
it's again a sort of meta thing in the way that this year's or last year, I think it might have been last year, UFO 50, can't remember if that
Mm.
was this year or last year, is like a fake game studio. This is like Davey Reedon would like, I mean, it's not a Kojima, but it's like a similarly oddball design figure in the beginner's guide. I forget the name of that fake character. And then his most recent game, Wanderstop, which is about like a like a mercenary who gets badly injured and opens a tea shop. Um,
Okay.
is about Davey Reedon's own burnout. So it's like, and he's talked about this. So it's like this, I made a game. And it's about how much you're like constantly striving, in your career, and then something will happen and it throws your career and you're like, now you're not on plan and so it's like, it's a whole nother layer of this sort of thing,
Wow.
and he's very forthright about that. I gather I've read some interviews at this point. So yeah, he is, his all of his games are like this. And I think some of the sort of madcap, um, presentation, some of the 2D materials, like I assume the slideshow is there. Of course, the slideshow is there, and things like
Yeah.
that. I think might have been introduced by William Pugh, who, as part of Crows, which is the other company I see associated with him, with this game. Um, he had a newsletter for years, or I don't know, mailing list, I should say, and it would just be all kinds of wacky, like GeoCities style emails that would show up with all kinds of HTML flashing and all this stuff in your and it was very much like tongue in cheek commercialism, but inexpertly done, but deliberately. So I mean, they both have their own kind of the Office style, whatever meta-ness about them. So two
Yeah,
very
that makes
interesting
sense.
creators. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got, for me at least, I felt like it had a pretty British, sensibility too. I don't know if they're both British, but it felt like that to me. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that Davy. I don't think Davy is, but I believe.
oh, okay, interesting.
I believe that. Yeah.
There's a cynicism that maybe I inappropriately associate in the sort of British humor, but
Yeah. William, I think is British, but I'm not sure that.
Davy is. Yeah.
I'm not sure that Davy is. Yeah, William went to school at Leeds, so he's almost certainly British, and Davy went to the University of Southern California. So
okay. Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that all of his stuff is in that sort of same, area of thought, and that this is the first, I guess, was this his first thing then?
This is his first. The mod was his first thing,
Yeah,
and then this game was the first commercial release.
Yeah, and I think
he was 22 when the mod came out. David Reed.
Oh, okay, great, good for him. Yeah, I think the thing that I was reflecting on that was a nice capper for this mini series was a little bit of my criticism, or my reaction, I guess I'll say, to us both realizing that Dear Esther was randomized.
Yeah.
And just that, that macro topic we've talked about many times of just the whole point of this game is to make sure that the player knows that it's a game, and to talk about the fact that it's a game, and to lean into, okay, this is interactive. Games are restarted, can be restarted, or that's up to the player to do, of course. They don't have to be. You could have played the happy ending once and then be done with it, I guess. But, leaning into the fact of the interactivity of it, and that choice is at the cornerstone of what, especially a I don't know, narrative or adventure type game, which, the narrator references in this game quite a few times, of like an adventure. We're on an adventure or something,
Right. Yeah.
Or manifesting an adventure through imagination, in fact. So yeah, I that's what I really appreciated having, because, Gone Home for me hit, and I don't want to get into takeaways too early, but Gone Home hit from a narrative perspective mainly. Dear Esther was almost more like tone, and like setting and feel, that kind of like, that ominous sort of depressing tone. But like, story is not what I would actually say, which, again, we now know was not part of the point of it for them, was not necessarily to tell a linear sort of complete narrative. And Firewatch was an interesting mixture, because there was definitely narrative in there, but I don't know. It was like more of living someone's life, I guess, and having things happen to them.
Well, and it was open world as well, right, to some degree. Although, I will say Firewatch appears in the Ultra Deluxe version of Stanley Parable. There's a point at which the narrator allows you to play, play some what other games are like. He's at this point had a meta discussion about Steam reviews, although they're called pressurized gas reviews that are in there. They're clipped in there. I mean, they're not probably real, but they're probably drawn from real reviews. And and he's getting upset, and he was like, well, let's see what some of the other ones are like. And so he puts you in Firewatch, and he like just totally dumps on it. It's like, okay, so you're some creepy guy in a tower looking down on the world in your creepy way, and you go out into the world, and it looks exactly, I mean, they probably just asked them for the files. It probably is, because it's also in Unity, which Firewatch was. And you go down and you start, and he's like, oh my God, and he starts slamming down the big brick walls as he realizes he could go in any direction. Like, this is terrible. You can go anywhere. Just like starts slamming down the walls, and eventually go out to something else. I forget what the next thing is that happens. It is quite a wild quite a wild thing.
Okay, I should maybe follow up on it then.
Oh, it's well worth playing the Ultra Deluxe. It's extremely funny.
Yeah. So it was just nice to have this one so squarely lean into the meta commentary and subversion that each of them so far have been dabbling with, but I just, they had different goals, I guess, right? Or they were just scratching the surface. But this one, it's like, a quick funny story that happened to me right away. I had immediately played, once I kind of pretty quickly understood what was going on. I was like, okay, I'm just going to do what the narrator said to have my baseline, which I got the happy ending. I was still fooling with my settings, though, my FOV or something like that. And this is so in pre-show, you told me about some of the setting stuff in the ultimate version. So this is like so ironic. And because I was fooling with my acceleration and, and just kind of trying to get it to feel right for me. And I had accidentally, when I left the settings screen, I had accidentally restarted the game. And of course, that's what they wanted you to do, but I didn't intend to do it. I was like, oh no, wait, oh no. And then, I hadn't intended to do that. But of course, because I did that, the game knew that I did that, and it kind of progressed into a new state, if you will. Right. So it was just a funny, way for me to discover how the game was structured, because all I had done was just played that first playthrough to the following all the instructions, and I had done it accidentally. It's like, oh, okay, that's what this game is. All right, so I'm just gonna be okay with restarting more generously.
Yeah, you definitely want to restart the game. In case of the Ultra Deluxe, you actually want to quit the game entirely. However you do that, depending on the platform. On a console, you actually have to kill the app externally to the product, but because you're not allowed to leave a game on the PlayStation, or I don't think on the Xbox. You have to use the OS. Same on the Switch. Like, they consider that crashing or something. Anyway, so you're kind of expected to interact with it like you would any other game, even though it's really short, in theory. And I played it for like 4 hours yesterday, just like digging into all the new things, certainly, but also just, refreshing me on all the different paths. And I didn't get all of them. They are, they definitely go all over the place. Their research showed me yesterday that there are 19 endings in the original game, which is a lot. Some of them were not. I think there's one that's kind of quote unquote not real, but players treated it as one because there was no way to. You can, in the mind control facility, you can get out of the path. You can climb up over the desk and over the wall. You're supposed to be restricted to the pathways way above the floor, and you could fall out of that and just go all the way down to the ground, and just be at the bottom. And in the Ultra Deluxe, they've now recognized that as something that people did in the original game. They comment on that and say, well, the narrator comments on that and says, you've done it. And then they have a song which has a chorus at the end that repeats like a whole bunch of times. I guess it's 5 times because it said, so it actually is 10 because it's the text on screen said ×5, but it was 2 lines of the chorus, which was "Good job, you did it." 10 times you hear this "Good job, you did it" at the end of getting at the bottom of the mind control facility. They really, yeah, they went all out. It's extremely funny. It's a banger of a tune, honestly. We should at least, for those who haven't played the Stanley Parable, we should probably pull back a little bit and talk about how it presents itself, which is as a as you said, sort of an office, send up, something out of Severance or something else, but where Stanley, the titular Stanley, is seated at his computer in his dead end office job. This is being narrated by a narrator. And after, as in my intro, Stanley realizes that no one is around after an hour, by the way, of just sitting at his desk doing nothing, apparently. Because if you look at the screen, there's like just the cursor, like there's no instructions that he's supposed to be following. He stands up and the narrator is saying, and Stanley stood up, and went to look for his coworkers. And as you move about in the environment, the narrator, actually sort of in advance of you doing things to kind of guide you, is telling you what you should be doing as Stanley. And of course, at numerous places, especially in the room with 2 doors, this is the first time that this happens. You can ignore what the narrator says. He says, a narrator will say something like, Stanley went through the left door, and you can of course then go through the right door. And he'll kind of try to keep the story on track by saying, but he first decided he wanted to go see the employee lounge or whatever it is, and then there'll be a subsequent places where you can go back on track or not. Did you go in the broom closet, for example?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that was great. I went in it twice, in fact, and then
Yep.
the whole thing about, this is the ending you're going to talk to your friends about, which I knew we would talk about on the podcast, was like, here we are currently at this moment talking about the broom closet. So he was right. And then later it's boarded up after you. It's like, no, don't go into the broom closet.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, there are times where the narrator gets kind of annoyed with you because you're not doing anything interesting. You have to go upstairs to get to your boss's office, but you can go downstairs and you get stuck in a dream that's extremely bizarre. And then that's one of the darkest endings, for sure. There are a couple of really dark ones like that one. That's the one where you get a narrator. The narrator switches to a different person who he's narrating the life of, which is this is the story of Mariella, who's the person who discovers Stanley's body on the sidewalk because he's gone crazy and collapsed or had a stroke or something. It is that kind of darkly funny, weird, constantly narrated thing, but not not in a serious way, like in something like Bastion, where there is a narrator who's narrating what the player does, but not in a meta way. So, and in fact, the narrator in that game is also, as I recall, a character you can meet, and I think you have to meet is on the critical path. And this is
I didn't know that. I never finished.
Yeah, I think you run into him eventually, and you hear his voice, and you're like, I mean, that guy has a great voice, by the way. The Bastion guy, what a voice, man.
Do you meet the narrator in this game, though? You're saying
you don't? No, not in this game.
Yeah, thought I may have misheard you, but yeah.
No,
in fact,
you meet him in Bastion.
The narrator in this game is key to the structure of the game and the subversion of the game too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's not just going in the wrong direction, but there's times when, I highly recommend it if you haven't played Stanley Parable, for sure. It's not, it's pretty scalable on time. 4 or 5 hours if you want to see most of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I bet. I think I only played about 3.5 hours, but I got a really good experience out of it, and I did miss stuff. I'm actually looking at one of my notes was obviously going to be about flowcharts. This is the flowchart game.
Yes, it is.
Talk about flowcharts so much; it's like the perfect example. But I'm looking. Don't look at the flow chart if you haven't played the game, of course. But I'm looking at it now, and it is interesting to see. Yeah. So the second ending I got, I realize now is the one I got accidentally, because it. I think once you restart after the first time or something, he says something like, "Oh, well, that was a choice," or whatever. The reluctant, I think, is what the. But
Oh,
anyway, yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting to see where some of this stuff goes. Looking at the flow chart of things, I was like, oh, of course, I could have done that. And of the thing I love about the game is that they have accommodated, because it's a game about meta commentary on player, character, and narrator. These three distinct, identities, and how they're interchanged, how they're interacting with each other. The fact that they have tried to accommodate the player's reaction to all of those, because for me at least, there were definitely times when they were separating the player and Stanley,
Right.
and the commentary on who has control over whom, and has Stanley always been controlled by this player, et cetera, et cetera. But then also the narrator's talking to the player, but also talking to Stanley. So I don't know, I'm sure all of that
Well,
was.
and Stanley himself has a job that is not that different from playing the kind of video game that they are
Yeah,
criticizing, right? In the sense of like you do the things that you're told to do, and that leads to, in the Stanley Parable, that leads to the happiness ending, which is like, oh, it's so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so. I also, the other thing I get a bit of a vibe on this from is Portal.
I was going to
Um,
mention Portal 2. I have it in my
yeah,
notes.
and
We
that's a
we need to play
future,
that.
yeah, future cast game that we have not. I don't know why. Maybe it's, I don't know. I can't
No,
remember
it
when it
just
came out.
hasn't.
Just hasn't
Yeah,
come.
I just
Haven't gotten
hasn't
around
come
to
up.
it, I guess.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's true. I feel like it was on the list at some point, but
It
we
was.
just.
I mean, I think the issue is that for so long, like the latest game we played was 2005, and I'm pretty sure it came out after 2005, right? So that might be why. Is that for a long time that was our cutoff, and it's like 2006 or seven or something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking because I wanted to 2007. Yeah,
Yeah.
because obviously the tone. This not just this being a Half-Life 2 mod, but this has also got influences from Portal, I'd say.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, without a question. Yeah, let you know of a few of the other delights of the game in the Ultra Deluxe edition. There is a point at which they, so there's a number of features that weren't in the game, that are in first person shooters, or in adventure games, say broadly speaking, such as being able to jump. There's in fact a achievement for trying to jump a bunch of times, but it not actually supporting that. So there's an achievement for like, nope, yeah, you can't. Sorry, we don't. There's no jumping. But in the new content, quote unquote, there's a door off one of the early hallways that is like new content. It has his new content is on the door, and then there's a sign outside that says new content with an arrow that points to the door that says new content, which is slightly ajar. And that happens after you've played through, once or twice in the original sort of configuration. What is the other one? Oh, right. So at a certain point, they're talking about the features that are going to be in, the Stanley Parable 2, which they are now revealing that this is the Stanley Parable 2, and the Ultra Deluxe edition. And after that, if you restart the game and go back to the main menu, it has a title screen, which is the Stanley Parable 2. But they have an area where it's like, well, actually, even before, I think there's sort of a whole expo hall about the Stanley Parable 2. But there's a point before that where there's a circle, and they're like, this is the jump circle. And if you're in the circle, you can jump. And there's a counter, and you're only allowed to jump 36 times. So there's that. And then there's a point at which there's a pause button. I mean, a skip button, because apparently in some review, this is when the narrator's all upset at reviews, that people wanted a skip button. And there's a skip button at a certain point, and you can skip whenever he's talking. And so then they have a lot of dialogue that just goes on and on and on. I mean, eventually it will loop if you listen long enough. But I think they actually maybe even randomize the lines a little bit, because there's some natural breaks where like you might not detect that you're hearing things again. I mean, if you're not really paying attention to what the words are. But you can hit this, and it's a button in the world. It's not like there's a button on your controller. There's like a literal skip button in the world. So you can press the skip button, and then after a while, he's like, "Wow, that's really weird. Like the first time you pressed it was only like 30 seconds before you came back, but now it's been like 2 days." And then the narrator starts to go crazy as you skip more and more. And eventually you skip like ahead of time. The narrator is long dead or something. And like the ceiling and part of the ceiling is caved in, and then greenery is growing in there. And eventually the skip button's gone entirely. It's like fallen over on its side. It no longer works. And you can walk out into this desert, which is like the world after millennia. Yeah, it just keeps it's like this, and then you go, and then the game restarts, and now there's new content with a big neon sign, and that's when you get like this new version of the where it's like now it's the Stanley Parable 2. I think that's when you get the expo. It's so weird, like what the order of things is, so it's like they don't always make sense, or it's not. There's no sense to it. It's so nonsensical that you're like, I can't remember what order things happened. But anyway, you go to this expo, the jump circle is there again. But since you've used up all of your jumps, it will have a 0, and you can't use it in the jump circle now, which is a great gag. I mean, if you had some jumps left, presumably you could have used them, but I had already used them all because I figured he would comment on it. And because he does, he says something like, "Oh dear, you've used up all your jumps." Well, there's a thing where the game's gonna talk to you about your name. He's gonna say your name, and you go and you press the button, and it says Jim.
Oh yeah,
and they're like, "Well, we haven't actually implemented that yet." So now I want you to pretend your name is Jim. And then you press the button, it says Jim, and it's like, isn't that amazing? and then it's like, if you press it again, it's like, well, I think you're getting too much into being Jim now, and eventually it'll take the button away. I mean, it just goes even further. There's an infinite hole, which turns out is not really infinite. Yeah, it's like that. The whole expanded area, and at a certain point, you can re-talk to the settings person, who I don't think is in your edition of the game. And you can choose to name the Stanley Parable edition. The third, is Stanley Parable 3. And it has two sets of boxes. So it's like the Accrual of Thank You edition, and it's Stanley Parable 3, but then the number keeps ticking up. So every time you play it, it is a new sequel, but all they've changed is the title screen. Because, you want to preserve enough of the original game to not make it, so that old players will still like it. I mean, they talk about this too. The narrator talks about this. Like, we don't want to change too much. We want to have it be familiar.
Oh my god!
And so it just goes. It is everything about game development.
Story of our lives. Story of definitely my life.
Yep.
Don't do something new, but not too new.
Yep.
Because everyone will be mad. Yeah. But also, it needs to be fresh. Yeah.
That is exactly what they do in the.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, the other side of it that I should have said earlier, as far as like what this has been able to uniquely do that the others, again, not to pit them against, because again they had different goals, so it's not a criticism as much, but and this is I think an unfair way to put it. I can't think of a better way though, but it's sort of like I could imagine a pretty good version of each of the other 3 that I played recently being a film, if you know what I mean. Like,
oh, interesting. Yeah,
there's enough of a story there. There's enough interesting things happening where it's not like it wouldn't have the same impact, because I'm I love anything interactive if I can get it. So especially I think On Home has a much bigger impact because you're playing the game versus just watching somebody else play or watching a film. However, my point is the Stanley Parable cannot be a film for it to be the same thing. You could make a Stanley Parable film, but it would just have to be, Severance. Just go watch Severance. But here it's like it is fundamentally about what it is, and it has to be interactive. So you have to make choices for it to work, at least in my opinion. And so I love that it is so squarely able to achieve that goal. And then I now obviously see what the hubbub was about this one, because there definitely was I don't want to say a sea, but there are quite a few of these in the space, but this one does always stand out, and people always mention it.
Yeah.
So I obviously can see now why, because it is,
Yeah, it's well worth, and I think the beginner's guide is also really worth playing. And I can't speak to Wonderstop because I haven't played it. But I imagine it is infused with similar. Although that one I think is less based on. It's not as clearly meta. It is meta, but it's not as clearly meta as this and the beginner's guide are.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the closest things I can think of to this, in sort of more linear spaces are something like, there's that the Agatha Christie play, I forget the name of, that the audience votes on who did it, and
I forget which one
the
that is.
Mousetrap? I think it might be the Mousetrap.
It might be. I was in the Mousetrap once, and
were
so
you?
if that's it, then I definitely feel bad. That's like you not knowing that Dear Esther was random and teaching the
Yeah,
game.
I know. Anyway, so whatever the Agatha Christie one is, there's one that has multiple, that literally anybody could be the killer, and the audience votes. And then the other thing, I know that there were some films in maybe the late 80s where they tried an interactive thing where they outfitted movie theaters with like an ABC button, and basically people were switching between directions that the story could go.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that
Yeah,
happening.
there's even Netflix was doing some of that recently.
And with the Bandersnatch thing, Netflix was doing that. And then finally last year there was a Brian Eno documentary. And Clue, of course, had 3 endings, and you didn't get to pick the ending you got when you went to the theater. You might get any of the 3 endings. But last year there was a Brian Eno documentary that is never the same twice.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, who else but Brian Eno? So, I mean, it's possible to push the boundaries of other things, but I agree, probably not this far.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the interactivity is part of it for me, but my film references or metaphor is comparison is more about like what I thought you were going to say was something. So still sticking in its medium, I guess, is my point. So
right.
like Memento, for instance, right? Like that is a linear film that sort of breaks the confines of linearity of the medium. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I gotcha.
But it's still a film that goes from point A to point Z. But so it's not
and likewise Dunkirk for that matter, which has
exactly
sort of 3 timelines that are at 3 different scales,
right,
in a similar way.
Yeah, and Nolan always did push on that. So again, I didn't want that to be sort of feel like a criticism or something against the other 3.
Celebration,
different goals, but it was just more of like, it is a celebration of how much you can embrace this particular goal that he and they had, and how well they do it. Because it's like, this was also it felt like very much a yes game that we've talked about before too, where it's like, okay, like in the museum, there's one of the placards. I think it shows the model of the initial office space, and it has the room with the 2 doors, and the placard says something like, during development, this room with the two doors was the first design choice we made, and everything unraveled from there.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
obviously, that's a tongue-in-cheek commentary on their whole tongue-in-cheek. You know, like
Yeah.
they're making fun of the person who's reading the placard. Like, yeah, of course, dummy. But it's also such a like a boiled down example of like, no, when it comes down to it, part of games is choice. Well, the key part of games is choice, player agency, in my opinion. And there's nothing more distilled down than two doors, you know. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's just there was actually because I was another anecdote streaming Outer Wilds last week, and I forget what I was doing, um, but what I do whenever I play a game most of the time, and then obviously I would do on stream as well. I'm not doing it just because I'm streaming to be entertaining or anything. It's just how I play games. I went into a space and they clearly wanted me to go left. Right, the game was telling me to go left, and I went right, and like to my death or something, it did something, and Biostats was like, "Well, of course you came into that room and went the other direction or turned right," you know. And I think because it's a video game, I always go the opposite direction they want me to go because there's got to be something there, you know.
Right.
I hope. So anyway,
Yeah, this time consciously playing the Stanley Parable, I did not. I went because, of course, I already knew the structure of the game. I was like, well, let me find as many endings as I can,
yeah,
and so I did it by working back from the end. Like, okay, I
mm,
went here. Um, I pushed the off button. I think the last choice you make is to push the off button for the happy ending. In the mind control facility, there's like a big off or on. Well, the other one, then I did the on button, and so, then there's a whole like escape. Can you escape the facility? And there's a tantalizingly like it lights up the whole area because you've turned the power back on, and now you can see there's a room with just tons of buttons everywhere, and there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 buttons. So you're like, oh, could it be one of those at a certain point? And the narrator is just like, oh no, you're going to die in 2 minutes,
yeah, yeah.
and
Just
then at a certain
commenting on
point,
you running around pressing
yeah,
buttons, and you're
exactly.
like,
It's like,
I bet
oh
you're
yeah,
just running around pressing buttons and thinking that you have control. You know, it's like, well,
yeah.
you don't. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and then at a certain point you've only got like half a minute left. He's like, you know what, I'm enjoying this. I'm going to put some more time on the clock, and then you're like, can I get out of this? Like it's just but he'll say like, no, not because you can get out of this if you have more time, just because I'm enjoying it this much. So it's very like, oh my god. I mean, they know players so well, of course, because they are players, and it just is like. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just a huge commentary on not only just like, us playing games, but also just like to what degree a person's life could be like this, like that you're
Yeah,
just following the scripts that are kind of laid down for you, which is so it's like another, there's a good reason why Stanley is just an office drone. It's because so many people could just be office drones, and what would it take to break out of that? So
yeah.
it's just a remarkable game.
The Mariella ending. I think that was her name, right?
Yeah, it's
Mariella.
Mariella. Yep.
That was another great example of what you were just saying. Is sort of layer upon layer, right? It's like, okay, Stan in that ending, Stanley's story is ended.
Yes.
Mariella, this, and then I think the narrator even says this is a story about a woman named Mariella, and
Yep.
she's about to go to the office, and
Yeah, she's on her way to work, and then she's like, "Oh," and then she just leaves the body, I guess, because she's going to be late for work.
yeah, not only that, but she runs off. You
Yeah,
know,
she
it's like,
runs
so
away.
it's just this comment again, like it's like, well, there's Stanley, and he went insane, but also the person that found him has a meeting in an office that she
Right.
has to get to,
Yeah.
and she's worried about being late, and so
Yeah.
she runs off after seeing the result of this other person who was in the same predicament. Yeah,
It's so good. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a great game. It's a great game. And a great another viewpoint on the walking simulator. Now you've had four.
Yeah.
effectively. So I presume, this is a whole new thing for you, and you're just going to play as many as you can find. So
Well, it definitely has, and I was trying to think about this last week, why I never played them, other than Dear Esther was the only one that I had back in the day. And I really have no explanation that I can come up with or remember. The only thing I can think of is just because of the mechanically and systemically, I'm looking for other things in games. But I really regret it because as we might segue to takeaways
yeah,
soon.
I was thinking so.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because in the indie space, I guess we said this before, but to reiterate it as we close down on this mini series, in the indie space, constraints are so important and also necessary because you're working on a budget, you're doing it with few people, you need that focus probably. But this sort of string of them that popped up and kind of their, technically I'd say are obviously still going. Um, uh, it's such a nice way to still have the Stanley Parable specifically kind of made me understand finally, being so late to the party on this, that you can do so much with this subgenre if you really put your mind to it and get creative about it. And it doesn't, I'm always so too focused on the mechanical and systemic side of, because I like all of that packaged together, and those have been often my favorite games. Um, you can still have high effectiveness by stripping out some of those elements. We've mentioned the MDA,
Right.
mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics theory before, blah blah blah. But there, those all three of those letters don't have to be equal for your experience to be fulfilling. Is kind of something that has been a great revelation for me, and now I want to make one. It's like I've been thinking constantly since we started this series about what would I do if I were to do one,
Yeah.
and I have something I already want to dabble in.
Yeah, back in the day, with Gone Home, in particular, when I played that when it came out, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I just kind of remembering this from Twitter, but I think that they, well, I know that they sort of, uh, open source the translations. The translations are basically fan translations. It's in a bunch of languages, but that's because people on the internet did the translating.
Wow.
And they enabled that by basically allowing for some of the text in the game, for the text and audio, I guess, for the journal entries to be replaceable. That's my recollection anyway.
Hmm.
And so when
Cool.
I originally played it, I actually in my head wrote a whole different story that was just in Gone Home. That
Oh.
was pretty dark. I mean, I didn't actually do the work to put it in the game, but I like planned out in my head like, oh, okay, you would be slowly discovering this, and it was more of a horror game that then was turned into a joke. It turned out she was being pranked by her sister when she got home, and they were like at a neighbor's house down the road or something. Oh yeah, we're just hanging out at the so and so's. So when you had that big end moment when you was like the journal, it'd be like the reveal would be like, oh, we were just punking you. We had this other thing come up.
Oh,
So
fascinating.
yeah. So I mean, I think even within the constraints of the 3 games we played, there's more that you could do. I guess is my point.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So you can take constraints however you wish to take them. And one of the ways I like to take our constraints is as a podcast. We do these takeaways at the end of each game or series of games in this case. And so let's turn now to our walking simulator takeaways. I'm gonna, as always, throw it over to you for the first one.
Yeah, and I've already said this many times through the series, but just to cap it off, my first one is what I was kind of just talking about, but just sort of the extreme focus through constraints and the less is more approach, and just in general the concept of, and it's very applicable to our indie series in general. because I have a feeling we're going to, we will have played a variety of genres, a variety of scope for each of the games that we play in the indie series. But with this one, the choice of focus and whether constraints were put upon somebody or they chose the constraints, both can happen. um, I've just been very appreciative to play this miniseries because of the extreme focus, and it's just a reminder to me, because I'm, like I was just saying, unfairly so, I always seek out wanting a nice balance and merger of all the different elements that a game can be, no matter the genre. It was a nice takeaway for me, an eye opener, that you can still focus on heavier in one of the areas and still succeed, have great success, in fact, and have a great, in Gone Home's case, emotional impact on me. In Stanley Parable's case, just this meta commentary that was blowing my mind, being such a gamer and also a developer. So yeah, that extreme focus and constraints, my first one.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I knew you were going to talk about that because you have, and it's like your number one thing as a designer, always thinking about what your constraints should be. As opposed to pulling the money lever, as we talked about. So I won't echo that one directly. I do want to start off by just in all three cases of these walking simulators, really commenting on how great, rich, useful, and connective narration is. They are in different forms here. There's the sort of Gone Home in situ narration, that's coming from a different character, but it's connected to things you find in the environment, versus the I'm not sure, even who's narrating. I think it's me, question mark. The character I'm inhabiting in Dear Esther, to the external, clearly external to me, but also knows a lot more about what's going on here than makes any sense, narration of the narrator in the Stanley Parable. And it's like the really excellent narrative work in each of the games, voice work, I should say, is really a huge credit, and really sets the tone for the experience. There's I know that SAG-AFTRA is there. I think they're still on strike against us at the time that we record this, and they are right to a degree that they should be fairly compensated for their work because it does so much. So that is my first one.
Good, nice. Yep, agreed on that too.
All right, back to you.
Yeah, this one, another kind of macro one, I guess. I think all of them really are, but for this series, I must be wrong on this, but is this the first time that we played a sort of a specific subgenre, multiple games in a row?
No, we did it for roguelikes and for text.
Okay, roguelikes and text. That's true, right? Text adventures, right?
Yep.
Those were all
text games. Yeah,
text
they were all different sorts of text games.
Adventure, right? Yeah. So I guess this sort of applies to those as well, though with rogues maybe a little bit. No, I guess it applied to those too. But so this is maybe a takeaway for all of the times that we've played the same subgenre, I guess I'll say, or genre, with multiple perspectives in a row.
Yeah.
But for this one, it was just, and I'll throw Firewatch in there, even though it wasn't officially, but it's still a good example. My takeaway of just like what a reminder. It's funny too, because Stanley Parable is making subversive commentary on this topic now that I think about it. But what differences within a specific subgenre can really be achieved, when people put their minds to it, because these are all clearly walking simulators, or whatever you want to call it. but they're all so very different, and they've all achieved so different things, in my opinion, too, even though they're, a pretty simple concept from a game perspective. But it's, as a takeaway for me, it's just a good reminder. And how many first person shooters do we have out there that are almost identical and hard to tell apart, or very, I've been a part of them, it's like very, very minimally changed, because, as you made the joke earlier, of like the safety that comes with minimal changes.
Yeah. I
And
I did not make the joke. Let's be
the
clear.
fear, the fear that comes from,
Yeah.
changing things too much. But when you're in the indie space A, and then you're making a specific subgenre B in the walking simulators, you still have so much room that you can maneuver to do something very special and unique, especially when you don't have sort of that sort of business corporate pressure that the non-indie games might have, right? To really like think outside the box. And all three of these games are so different in even though they're very similar because of the walking simulator genre, they are all very, very different experiences. And that's just a good reminder for me,
Yeah.
how wide something can be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's I think it was maybe Chris Hecker who talks about, how we've, it might not be Chris Hecker. I can't remember who talks about it, but how we've kind of been mapping out the space, but like of games, but the space is huge. There's places we have not discovered at all. And there's tons of space not covered by even what we've done, and so for any genre we play. And to be clear, when we played roguelikes, we actually played adventure, a bonus roguelike when we played Rogue. It wasn't that we played roguelikes altogether.
Right. I see. Yeah, you're right. We played Rogue Legacy. Was that it?
Yeah, we played Rogue Legacy, or Rogue Legacy 2, I guess,
Yeah.
which of course
Yeah.
I'm playing again right now. Sort of. I've kind of moved on, but 'cause I was like, yeah, I've kind of played this a lot, so maybe time to go. Anyway, yeah, my second one is how much these games play against expectation. They end in different ways.
Mhm.
The randomness of the Dear Esther is kind of one of the ways that it plays against expectation. Also, like, just that there's not one answer, one true story here. I mean, there's very little that you can say definitively happened. And with Gone Home, I think it's the subject matter is totally like, I mean, I knew, oh, you're coming home to an empty house, you're going to explore it. What I didn't expect was a coming of age story, where a young woman is also discovering her sexuality. Like, nope, had no idea what I was going to get out of the game. And I think it plays like, that's not a thing games do talk about.
Yeah.
All three of these do things that, games don't talk about. And of course, in the Stanley Parable, not only just the great humor of it, which of course I did sort of expect, just knowing what was coming, but just how far outside the box they went. I mean, when they introduced the adventure line to like keep you on track, and then the fact that you can't actually follow the adventure line everywhere. And I mean, it just goes so far afield, including things like the broom closet or these very dark endings, or like, I mean, just like the many, many ways that this game sees your expectations and plays against them. They're all in conversation with, the player in some different way. Touching on deep human emotions in different ways, or just like, hey, you're a player, I'm a player, I see you, in the Stanley Parable, but all by playing against sort of what we expect from video games.
Yeah, my last one is very, very similar. I was talking about subversion specifically, but I do think it's just subverting expectations, to your point. So I think we actually have pretty much the same
Yeah.
one at the last one, because and I don't know, upon thinking about this one when I put it down, I don't know if this is a fair way to put it, but I think that one, from an analytical like game development perspective, if I imagine myself making one, I'm wondering if the subverting and playing against expectations is actually one of the mechanics of a walking simulator that is like this, that does have some sort of narrative to it. And then what I mean by that is, when you do start stripping away other mechanics and systems that a game like a first person shooter would have, like Halo or something, you are left with fewer things, fewer tools in your toolbox. And when all you're doing is walking around and potentially interacting with things, your observations of the space and you're listening to what's going on is really your bread and butter. And so one of the biggest tools you're going to have is subverting expectations about what the observations are that you have. That's kind of one of the only things you have, because you don't, there are no other like skill based tests or anything like that. Um, and of course, you have interactivity, so you want to lean into the interactivity where you can, or it being a video game. So each of them handle that in their own way. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to know, like, when you strip away all these things, you still do have tools that you can use. So maybe this is turning into a bonus takeaway, but when you do have so many constraints and you have stripped away so much of what people might call the traditional game stuff, you still have tools that you have at your disposal to create an experience with. And definitely playing against player expectations was the case in all three of these, and definitely four of those I would call in Firewatch.
Oh yeah, for sure. This one, my final one, actually applies also to Firewatch. So I think it's important, and the sort of meta theme, because having played a meta game, I'll also introduce, and that is that these are recognizable human spaces.
Mm.
All three of them, all four of them, in the case of Firewatch, if you include that one. These are all spaces we could occupy. Like literally, each of us, could go. I mean, the fire towers are a little remote, but you can go to one. I've been up a fire tower before. There's some of those in New England. You could go to a seaplane. Thanks for buzzing. You could.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right. You can go to an island. One of us lives on one. It's not as craggy as the Hebrides or something, but it's a recognizable space. And of course, office buildings. Many of us have been to office buildings. Dare say, probably all of us have been to those. So, and of course, like the suburban home. Like, so I mean, you can't get more prosaic than that. And then the sort of meta commentary around all three of these is that all of these, and the second one kind of recognizing the human behind the screen by playing against expectation, all of these are ways to connect to humanity, right? To our shared humanity. So there's the voice speaking to you, but also the designer speaking to you with their expectations, and then of course the spaces being places that we've been, are all ways that I think that this of course walking is like the human thing, on two legs, because two legs good, four legs bad, or something.
Hmm.
But so that's just our most deeply human thing. Before even language, we were walking on two legs. So it is, or at least that's as I understand it. Who knows? I wasn't there. Tim was. um, but anyway, that's my third and meta takeaway, to
Yeah.
also add a bonus.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's an interesting one too, because it shortcuts a lot of stuff, for the player to get over hurdles, right?
Yeah.
To give some recognizability, and you're having to explain less because you do have such a constrained approach to what you're doing. So there's going to be benefits that It's funny because I'm playing Outer Wilds right now, and not to put a comment there, but there's definitely other gameplay at play with that because of I guess I'd say the flying around and stuff, but
Yeah.
largely it's an adventure game, walking simulator-y kind of game, you know what
Yeah,
I
it
mean?
is.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and It is, but it is not a human space. It is an alien space, and well, it's planets, but they're tiny planets, and so it's interesting. I don't know where that game's going to go. I keep hearing people flip out about it, and I'm starting to see why after 2 sessions, but you're unraveling all of the things that are not familiar to you, alien races and different solar systems and all the stuff that is a bunch of mysteries that I assume you're going to solve. And so it's an interesting counterpoint to, not counterpoint, but comparison to, okay, I don't know anything about this place, in Outer Wilds case. And part of that, the currency, which is a word I should have used earlier for the subversion or playing against expectations, is a currency in these games. The currency in Outer Wilds is that mystery of the unknown, right. Which is something that you seem to be, making known over the course of the game.
Yeah. That's a good game. I really should go back and finish it. There was one part where I'd gotten very frustrated.
I remember you saying that.
Something I was trying to do, and I'm not sure you have to do it the way I was trying to do it. I think there was an achievement, and so I was like, I'm going to get the achievement. And then I couldn't get it, and I was super annoyed. And I think I just put it down. So childish of me. But so maybe I'll get back to that. It'd be a good thing to do once you catch up to where I was. I was getting quite close to the end, as I recall. So I really should just go back and finish it. It is a very enjoyable game, though. I like it a lot. All right, well, that is our show. We love to get your email. We've been doing these indie games. We've been getting fewer emails, which is fine. I expected not as many people have played these games, relatively speaking. It's not a SNES classic or something like that, but we do love to get your emails at devgameclub@gmail.com. And, of course, reviews via, whatever review, podcast software you're using. We think we're 5 stars or thumbs up, whatever you're allowed to do, but you do you. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com, or you can find my co-host twitching at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
As you've pointed out, you are currently playing Outer Wilds, and hopefully that will continue not this week, but next.
Correct.
I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yes.
And you can also find us on the Fan Run Discord. There is a link in the show notes. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo, that Discord, our merch store, all by Mark Garcia. Have fun filling yourself with inner richness this week, and good night.
Good night.